Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another live stream. Excited to be back here. And today we're talking about something fun, which is the behind the scenes of my podcast launch. I wanted to talk about this because it's something that has been taking up an immense amount of my time lately. And I've gotten a lot of questions about kind of the whole process of how I did that. And I think that like I really did try to take a very strategic approach to it, not just like, oh, I'm gonna launch this thing and like see what happens, to some degree that is my personality. Generally I try to like just dive into things and see what happens. But with this in particular, I really wanted to make a concerted effort to like ensure that it was like super high quality, right? Because I have kind of a more sizable audience now than I did when I first started Creator Wizard. And so any new project that I would launch would have more eyeballs on it and reflect on my brand and how I'm serving my community and audience and so on. And so plus I felt as though it had a lot of potential, right? And so for those of you who are not familiar, my new podcast launched, I guess, what was it, about 10 days ago now on January 30th. And the podcast is called Creator Debates. And the tagline is stupid arguments to help creators make smart decisions. And every episode is basically will pits two high profile creators against each other to debate a hotly contested topic in the creator economy. And so you can imagine like some of the episodes we've had go live already are like video versus non-video podcasts. Like this is a very hot topic right now, right? And hustle culture versus life design, for example, right? You've seen these, those, hustle culture threads and TikToks and all that stuff too. The one that's going live on Monday is Twitter versus Instagram. And that one is a blast. I just looked at the final cut of it and uploaded it, scheduling it and all that good stuff. So yeah, excited to chat more about this. Let me know where you're tuning in from in the chat. We've got Fourth Born Child, greetings all the way from the Philippines. What's going on? We've got Aaron's House of Legos. I love creator debates. It's very enjoyable. Thank you, Aaron. That means a lot, man. And we've got Kaylee Carroll. What's up, Kaylee? Good to see you. Let's see who we got in the chat here on. We got Tam Bam. We've got Life as Maria. Good. How are April and the boys? Good to see you. They're great. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that. We've got Coco tuning in all the way from Berlin. We've got Architectural Sheet Metal 101. What's going on? Let me pull up my Instagram to see who's there. We've got Green Industry Podcast from the ATL. What's up, Paul? Good to see you. Nilesh Kapoor from London. Pinch of Chris from Texas. Good to see you. Good to see you all. So for those of you who are thinking about launching a new project, or maybe it's a podcast or whatever, this is going to be the podcast for you, because I'm going to go real. I made a bunch of notes, so I'm going to go in detail about kind of the process of how I did this. Intolerant Furball, good to see you as well, tuning in from MN. So the first thing I wanted to talk about when launching a new project is like why, right? You always have to kind of go back to the why, which is like, we're all busy, right? Especially if you're already a creator, you already have platforms, you're already pumping out content. I'm sure some of us get these like, miraculous ideas in the shower or like right before we go to bed or something, like, oh, I should do that. But then it's like, oh man, it's so much work. Like, should I really do it? I'm already really busy. Maybe I already have a full-time job and I'm doing my current thing as a side hustle, whatever. And so that very much is me. Like, I'm super busy, right? I've got the stuff that my wife and I do personally on our channels. I've got all the Creator Wizard stuff, coaching, courses, like so much. I'm doing so much stuff all the time. And so I'm like, am I really going to launch a podcast? Like, what on earth is my problem? Is wrong with me? But I felt as though the idea was just too good to pass up. So the other aspect of it too, I think, is that I really wanted a new creative challenge because, I've been going on, basically been in this space since 2009. So going on like 14 years now. I think, you get into a routine and a rhythm with the way you've always done things, right? So, we've literally uploaded thousands of videos on our YouTube channels over I think we have over, I don't know, like 1,200, 13, I don't know, I'd have to look at our channels, but like just on one channel, like 1,300 videos or something. And that's just one channel. So like we've been around the block for a long time. And so it was exciting to me to like, oh, I have a new, something to sink my teeth into, right? And the other aspect is that I was really excited about finding a way to talk about the things that I also really enjoy, because I think a lot of us get you hear this conversation all the time. Oh, you got to pick a niche, which obviously I'm like a big fan of. It definitely worked for me, right? I niched down into like being a sponsorship coach, right? How much more niche can you get than that, right? And yet at the time when I launched my channel, Creator Wizard, it was not about sponsorship coaching, right? I did not think that was going to be my niche. My tagline was the business of being a creator, right? And so I thought I was going to talk about digital products and courses and, email list strategy and merchandise and direct fan funding. And yeah, sponsorships was going to be a component of it, but it wasn't going to be the whole thing, right? And so it wasn't until a while in that I made that pivot. And I'm so glad I did, obviously, because it had such a tremendous impact on the business and everything too. But I still had this itch in the back of my mind that like I really wanted to like talk about these other things that I also really enjoy. And so over the last like month or so, I've been thinking about. I'm actually hopefully going to be giving a talk on this subject, and it's something what I call the Trojan horse strategy, which is that when you pick a niche, it helps you at the outset, right? When no one knows who you are or no one knows that you have an expertise in a particular thing, niching down really is a way that, really time-tested and proven way to, be a larger fish in a smaller pond, right? There really is something to that. And so when I look back kind of with 2020 hindsight at the trajectory that I've had or how the career has gone down, is like, now that I've established, what they call kind of the know, like, and trust factor with this core community that I built, and they really have appreciated my insights into sponsorships, I felt more free to take a step back from that niche a little bit and start talking about some of these other things that I also enjoy, right? Because there's a lot, and interestingly, like, as the moderator of this podcast, I'm able to bring on lots of different types of guests who have these very diverse opinions, and we oftentimes do end up talking about sponsorship strategy related. Like, so the episode that's going live on Monday, Twitter versus Instagram, the both of the guests came at it from like okay, how can you use them to kind of like grow your coaching or courses, digital products, things like that. But we ended up drifting into a conversation around sponsorships and how you can, it's another income stream potentially that you can utilize on these platforms. So I'm able to kind of still utilize my expertise on some of these conversations. That's not the primary goal, obviously, but it's really interesting. And so I was able to lean on that credibility that I had built on this niche and say, hey, you have enjoyed these, subjects of what I'm talking about over here. Like, take a sidestep to the right here. And I'm going to talk about something slightly different now, but I think you're also going to enjoy it. And so I think it's just, again, it's further solidifying the know, like, and trust factor, because I believe that if people hear me talk about other types of issues too, it will also reinforce sponsorship strategy, right? Because it allows me to show that I have a broader perspective, that I'm not myopic about sponsorships. Because you could make that argument like, oh, he's so focused on sponsorships, but like, that's not the only way to make money. Like, there's all these other things too. And I agree. Like, I largely agree with that statement. I do argue though that sponsorships can be a much more, continuous and a repeatable and dependable income stream than most people realize. But I personally have lots of income. My wife and I have lots of income streams, affiliate income, digital products, coaching, all that stuff too. So it's like, I definitely agree with that statement, but it's like, I do feel that having this kind of broader perspective where I can showcase my expertise in multiple arenas is generally advantageous, generally beneficial overall. And so that's kind of how I'd approach it and why I decided like this was a worthwhile thing to do. The other thing I think also that is a not often talked about perhaps when it comes to launching a new project is that I was very strategic about the format of it. Is that it is a podcast. It's not like a new YouTube channel where I'm just going to make like static YouTube videos about these things, right? Or I'm interviewing people in that way, right? And the reason is that it is now a new content format for my business. And you probably saw, if you watched the first couple episodes, that I got them sponsored right out the gates by ConvertKit, which is the email service provider that I use. And so the inherent difference with something like a podcast or a newsletter, for example, is that having multiple sponsors in one podcast episode of in one podcast episode is very common. if you've ever listened to a podcast, you probably have heard multiple ad reads, basically, right? And contrast that with other content formats across other platforms, and you will almost never see that, right? You will never, you very rarely will see like multiple sponsors in a YouTube video, like a regular like VOD, format, right? Or multiple sponsors in a Instagram post or something like that, right? Or a TikTok. That also allows me, if I have a brand coming in, some sort of creator economy startup who wants to have me spread the word about their tool or their startup or whatever, which is happening more and more, then now I have a laundry list. I've got this like menu now of all these different things, ways in which I can solve brands' problems, right? So they come to me and they say, hey, we really want to do X. And then I come to them and say, well, we could do a newsletter blast, or we could do an integration into a YouTube video, or, I have this podcast here. And, if I think that this might lend itself, with this type of format would lend itself well to actually being talked about in the podcast, right? And so I think that that's like a really important factor, which is that, now I have this really exciting new revenue format or revenue stream that I believe is going to become sizable. And right now it's not. I mean, it's nice. It's offsetting a significant portion of the production cost because I hired an editor, which we'll get to. But I think that's something that not enough people think about is like, okay, launching a new thing, but like, how are you going to pay for it? Is it just going to come out of your, like, what is the monetization strategy? And so for me, right at the gates, I was like, I'm gonna launch this podcast because I'm fairly sure that I can get this sponsored pretty easily. so that was part of the plan, right? So I'm going to go, the next thing I want to talk about is like, how did I actually launch it? And so I want to kind of go through the steps there, but I'm going to dive into the chat here and see what we got. See what we got here. In questions and things like that. That's what I'm looking to get sponsorships and speakers for our event in London and Dubai. Oh, awesome. Done events with Gary Vee and Eric Thomas, but struggling to get the right knowledge, how to get the sponsorship as no experience in events, but still managed to get big names. Got it. Awesome. Yeah, we could talk about that, kind of my perspective on like sponsorships for events and so on, because I have coaching clients who have in-person conferences and events and things like that. And surprise, surprise, it's not that much different. Like getting your conference sponsored is not really that much different than getting your contents, sponsored. It's just the philosophy and the way that you approach it in terms of how you're helping brands achieve their own objectives, right? So yeah, we can definitely chat about that. Let's see who we got in. Pej Ruse 19 says Trojan effect. That's interesting. Yes. I'm definitely going to be talking about that. Hopefully, will this be posted anywhere? I'd like to watch when I have some free time. Life as Maria. Yes, it's good. The replays of all my live streams are on my YouTube channel on Creator Wizard. So it's like youtube.com/@Creator Wizard. So my handle is Creator Wizard. Make an audience niching down. Yes, absolutely. So, okay. So, let's dive into, the next, topic about like launching this new project, which is coming up with the format, right? So the one thing that like the primary thing that most people have told me when they've listened to it is that the format feels very fresh and unique. If you've ever listened to podcasts, especially like an interview podcast, it kind of relies on the same formula, right? You've got the host introduces the guest, they say their bio, they basically the first question is almost always like, so tell us how you've gotten to where you are today, basically, right? And if you enjoy listening to a podcast of like similar, like, maybe you really like somewhat like one particular personality or something like that. If you listen to a bunch of their podcasts, it kind of starts to get boring because they just say the same thing over and over. You listen to them on like 5 different podcasts and they just go through the same story of like, they're being asked the same questions. How did you start your business? How did you make money? How did you blah, 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 blah. And I was just like, to me, that's like kind of starts to get boring. I enjoy listening to some of those podcasts. Don't get me wrong, but it's like to a certain amount, right? And then I kind of start tuning out, right? And so I thought to myself, like, how can I make this a format where I almost took the YouTube strategy into the podcast where it's like retention, right? Like, how do I get retention right away? And what my mindset was like, I'm not going to start with bios. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm just going to dive right in. I'm going to do a little intro as the host, and then I'm just going to dive right in. And I'm like, all right, opening arguments, right? So this is the structure. It's like, I've got basically like a 1 to 2 minute intro, kind of talking about why we're going to be debating this topic. And then I do a kind of quick little 1 to 2 sentence intro of the guests and why I, brought them on. And then I just dive dive right in. I don't ask them any questions about their background or anything like that. It's okay. Opening arguments, right? Like, tell me why you think Twitter is, best for growing your business, or tell me why you think Instagram is, right? And so I have found that punchiness is really exciting. I think it's like, from a retention perspective too, it's like you keep people's interest. I have like a little bit of time kind of at the back end of the show to kind of go a little bit more detailed talk about why I enjoy following these people and so on. But I think that's like it's an intentional decision that I made, right? And so I've got the intro, and then I have the opening arguments, which is basically 2 rounds each. And I've got this buzzer, right? I've got a buzzer here. So if people go over time, I have like a timer. It's fun, right? I wanted to make it fun. I wanted to make it like dynamic. I didn't want it to be just like people are falling asleep on this, right? I wanted to keep it fun for the guests, not just for the audience too. So you've got 2 minutes for the opening arguments, and then you've got there's 3 rounds, each of like different topics, and then 2 minutes each, basically, for each person to make their argument. And there's like a little bit of kind of back and forth. Someone wants like to do like a little rebuttal, I'll allow that, but I keep the format very, very succinct. I keep it tight because I don't want these podcasts to turn into an hour-long things, right? And so I very intentionally, I basically get the guests out of there in max 30 minutes. Right. So it's quick. And so far, so good. Basically, like, people have said that, like, it just feels very unique. It feels very structured. And I think that novelty hopefully will be a boon to to just like the discoverability of the podcast, people recommending, word of mouth, people recommending it to their friends, and so on. So that was the format. Let me scroll down here and make sure. Okay, I want to make sure my Instagram froze for a second there. The name. How did I come up with the name? So it's hard, right? Because I wanted to find something that had. I'm like kind of a naming like dweeb, because I get really obsessed with it, because I want it to sound like when you say the name to someone, it's not confusing, right? Like the words are not confusing. It's not like a play on words, or there's not like a misspelling intentionally to like be like tongue in cheek or whatever. If you say someone verbally, like, hey, have you listened to the Creator Debates podcast, right? Like, you could go and just like pull that up and Google it, and you could find it, right? So that was one criteria. The other one was that the URL was available. I wanted to make sure the URL was available, and also the socials. So I don't know. I kind of feel like I lucked out that all of those socials were available basically everywhere: Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, the URL. So I basically bought everything immediately once I was like landed on this idea. Like, okay, we're doing this. I want to do this, right? And so yeah, that's kind of how I arrived at that decision. I think people don't spend enough time thinking about the kind of the branding and the naming of their new creation, of their new project, because it makes a difference. Like, it's not that you can't succeed with like an okay name, but it definitely helps if it's memorable, right? If people can say it to their friends, there's Google it, like it's not hard to like understand how to spell it, all that stuff too, right? So that's naming. The tagline. I was very intentional about the tagline too, right? Stupid arguments to make creators. Sorry, I'm a little tired today. I woke up pretty early. Stupid arguments to help creators make smart decisions, right? So there's a couple things going for it. The word "stupid" right at the front of the tagline is kind of it kind of punches you in the face, right? That's what one of my friends said to me. It's like, it punches you in the face. And it also, what does it communicate with that, using that word "stupid"? It's that there's going to be humor, right? that there's going to be, it's not going to be a boring business format and like you're going to fall asleep, right? It's probably going to be entertaining, right? If I'm using that word. But also I was able to contrast the word "stupid" with the word "smart" at the end of the tagline, right? So it's like stupid arguments to help creators make smart decisions. So it's like yin and yang, right? So it's like you've got some humor, but you've also got takeaways, right? And so I very much wanted to have that contrast in the way in which I was describing the show. And it also feels like very much aligned with like my personality, right? You guys know, I'm like silly. I've got a soundboard here. I've got a soundboard. I use it all the time. You probably feel like, I wanted the way in which I talk about this project to be in alignment with like my personality, right? And so I think that that's like an important thing you shouldn't overlook, right? So that's the tagline. The next thing into, a Durag the Dev the Goat says it plays into those old For Dummies books. Yeah, you know, it's funny, dude. Like, I've kind of started leaning into that shtick, right? Like, where, you know, I kind of like treat I show my expertise, but then at the same time, I'm like, I basically, before I introduce people, I'm like, you know what? I'm just confused. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like, I don't know. I need to get some experts in here to like school me, basically, right? And so I very much play into that because I think it's fun, right? And I honestly, though, it is a component of my personality. Is I very much consider myself a student of life, a student of learning, and I'm always trying to learn and do better. And so I feel so privileged to be able to have these awesome conversations with these people who I really admire, right? So definitely, it's funny that you mentioned that, because that's very much kind of like the tone that I wanted to go after with that. So the tagline, the next thing is I hired a designer, right? So I didn't want to just like whip up something in Canva or something. No shade to Canva. I love Canva. But like, I really felt like I needed something. I need a logo. I need the branding. I wanted the branding to kind of tie in to my Creator Wizard branding. So I wanted it to feel almost like a cousin or a sibling or something of the branding for Creator Wizard. So I used the same brand colors, the kind of the purple color that I use for Creator Wizard to kind of have that brand association. But then we did some like really clever things with the dead space and the logo. Actually, let me pull up the logo so we could talk about it, because spent a lot of time on this. Let me Creator Debates. I'm pulling it up. Creator Wizard branding, Creator Debates branding, and then let me show you this one. Okay, so this is the actual podcast cover art. So let me pull it over to this screen here so I can get like a full screen vision of this. Those of you guys who are on TikTok, I think you'll see it. We'll see here. Share screen. Here we go. Let me know if you guys can see this one, hopefully. Oh no, you're not gonna be able to see it on TikTok, but you will be able to on Instagram, hopefully. Brianna says, haircut looks great. Thank you, Brianna. Appreciate you so much. Brianna, next cohort of the course, opening enrollment in 2 weeks. So if you want to get some of that sweet affiliate revenue, you know where it's at. 2 weeks. Appreciate you so much, Brianna. Actually, why don't I like not do it so big, and maybe the folks on if I scroll this down, there we go. Can the folks on IG see it now? Easier. I'm gonna do it like that, because I think if I reduce the size, IG folks will be able to see it. So you can see a couple things, right? I've got the creator element with the lens, and then I wanted a podium. I wanted to figure out a way to pull in the debate element. So the beautiful part about the word debate is there is a T in there, and that looks like a podium, right? So we leaned into that, and we used the dead space in the T to actually put like a little microphone there. So tell me what you think. Like, I feel like this looks super fun and super dope. And you could see also the other element that we pulled was the stars. So if you go and you look at my, the Creator Wizard logo, I've got these stars for the wizard. I've got those pulled into the Creator Debate logo as well. So yeah, you could tell like I did a lot of, and this is the podcast cover art. So I don't have my face in there or anything either. So this is like, I spent a lot of time like thinking about this. I hired a designer. We got the, YouTube chapter, or, a banner. We got everything. I thought about all the ways in which this would appear. Like that very much was like intentional. And so I feel like that's an important thing when you're launching a new project. It is like to really do it right. So that's the logo. And then let's talk about logistics, right? So I knew that I was not going to be the one able to like edit this, because it was going to be a lot of work, right? And so I sought out basically to hire an editor. I made a job description. I posted it on Upwork, and I posted it within my community. Like, I sent out something to my newsletter saying like, hey, I'm looking for a new editor for this new project. Anyone interested? Like, apply here. And I got probably 150 responses but between Upwork and my newsletter and all that stuff too. So it was like, it took a lot of time sifting through all that because people, submitted stuff about their portfolio. Let's talk real quickly about this, which is that what not to do, because I think it also ties into like pitching yourself as a creator, or when you're applying to partnerships and stuff like that. A huge percentage of the people who applied did not submit their portfolio. They did not submit work of like, hey, here's how I could like, like help you. It was like people like kind of said, oh, I'm an awesome editor and I can definitely do this, all that stuff too. But they didn't have a portfolio. They didn't have anywhere that they could like point me to like be like, look at my work. Right. And so you have to give yourself a fair shake. It's like a resume, right? You have like, if I'm looking through 150 applications, like I need to at least be able to click on a channel, click on a Dribbble page or like a, what are those design pages, Google's, some people's like, even some people sent me like Google folders with like some movie files in there. That's okay. That's better than nothing. Right. And so you have to give yourself a fighting chance is all the, the point I wanted to make. Right. So, searched out editors. Here's what I did. I recorded the first episode. I said, I found basically 3 that I thought, these people, there's promise here. And so I recorded the first episode and I basically said to them each, like, I'm going to hire you for this first project. And I basically gave the same footage to all 3 editors. And I say, okay, this is going to be kind of a trial. It's paid. Obviously, I'm going to compensate you. But I just kind of want to see what you do with it. I gave them very little creative direction because I wanted someone who had an eye and wanted someone who I wouldn't have to hold their hand or micromanage because I'm just so busy, right? And so I needed someone that was competent in that regard, and so kind of let them do their thing. And all 3 of them came back, and I wasn't super thrilled with any of them. So that was, and I was bummed. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Like, I still haven't found anyone. So I kept kind of looking on Upwork, and then randomly out of the blue one day, this guy named Divya cold emailed me. He cold emailed me. He had seen, I think I had tweeted about the project at one point, and he basically said, I'm an editor. I'm really interested in this project. I think I can actually take it to the next level. Let's chat, basically. And so I was like, sure. I didn't know who this guy was, but he just cold emailed me. But I said, sure. I did the same thing. I said, I'll compensate you for this thing. I'll give you, here's the files, basically. And he came back and he just like killed it. And he now is like, he has now taken over the editing responsibilities for not just the podcast, but for my main YouTube channel, as well as all my shorts. So it's like, he shot his shot basically, and it turned into like a much bigger partnership than I think even he anticipated. Right. And now he has like other editors helping, because it's a lot. I'm probably, between the podcast and my YouTube channel and my shorts and everything, I'm probably going to be putting out over 100 assets every month, probably more than that. Right. Because with the podcast, let's talk about like all the different, formats of the podcast, right? So I've got the long form episode, which is about 30 minutes long. Then we're going to cut that into 4 to 5 clips, right? If you've ever seen podcast clips on YouTube, this is like, excerpts of the show. So like 3 to 5 minute juicy, sections of the show that will hopefully lead to, people consuming the long form version. So you've got those. Then we've got shorts for each episode. We've got, 4 to 5 shorts that we're going to be putting across social media for discoverability. And so that's just the podcast. And then we also have the audio version, right? So we do the video version, and then we cut the audio version. So even that's a lot, right? And then we have my YouTube videos. So the podcast is going to be every other week, right? And so every other Monday. And then my Creator Wizard videos are going to be the weeks in between. So basically twice a month there. So I'll have a new asset from my brand once a week. And then shorts. So like I have, every live stream, I don't know if you noticed this, every live stream that I do here, like on Fridays, we download the archive or the replay of that, and we chop it up. We chop it up into 15 to 20, shorts, 30-second to 1-minute shorts that we then add subtitles to, and graphics and effects and all that stuff to. And then we repurpose those on social medias, right? So I'm trying to be smarter, not harder, right? And so from every live stream, I'm getting 15 to 20 shorts. From every VOD for my Creator Wizard stuff, I'm getting, probably 5 to 10 shorts as well. And so like you just start adding all those numbers up, like that's a lot of stuff that I'm filming dedicated shorts too, not just repurposed stuff from the live stream. Right. So it's a lot of stuff. And so he, Divya and his team have basically kind of taken over that responsibility. And so and it's a huge lift. I mean, it's a lot to organize and a lot to manage and all that stuff too, which we could save that conversation for another day in terms of how we're managing the workflow, because we have like multiple projects that are being edited at once and need feedback and being slotted in for scheduling and all this stuff too. I'm like a publisher. It's like, a lot of stuff. Right. And so I wanted to talk about kind of how I launched. That was the kind of how I launched it section, because it was not fly by night. It was not something I'm going to launch a podcast and then I just like release the episode. It was like, there was a lot of like work that went into that. Right. I'm going to take a pause here. Let me know if you have any questions about the stuff that I've talked about here, because I do have some other aspects of launching it. I want to talk about how I'm recruiting guests, as well as kind of like how I marketed it prior to the launch, as well as kind of my ongoing plan, for the podcast. So I'm going to take a pause and take a swig because I've been talking for a while. Those of you, let me know in the chat. Drop like a praise hands emoji or some gems if you have watched any of the initial episodes or listened to Creator Debates, my new podcast. I would appreciate that so much. And if you haven't yet, it would mean so much to me if you subscribed or left a review. Actually, leaving a review is probably one of the most meaningful things that you could do, because it tells the podcast algorithm, about the podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify or whatever, that my show is good. And it'll start, recommending it to more folks. So, and there's also a social proof element when someone like goes to the podcast page and there's like, 100 5-star reviews, like that also is kind of leads to the flywheel effect of like people being like, oh, this is something good, I'm going to subscribe to it. Right. So it's in the early days, it's difficult. And so I'm going to rely on you guys. My what's it called? My tried and true, not tried and true. My ride or die, live stream folks, you got to please go leave a review. That would be just like amazing. Okay, so let's talk about recruiting guests. So, you may have seen like some of the initial guests that I am getting to like be on the podcast are quite sizable. Like they have people, they're mostly people who have very large audiences. And the way in which I did that is, initially I leaned into my personal network. So I did, because this, the fact that I had built an initial audience and I have quite an extensive network from my other stuff that I'm doing, I leaned on that, right? I called in favors. I basically, told some of my close friends, I said, hey, will you guys, I'm trying this new project. Will you just like be guests for like the first couple episodes, right? So Jay and Joe, who are my close friends, they were on the first episode. And it allowed me to kind of ease into it, because I was super nervous. I was so terrified to do this because I'm not a nervous person, but I was really nervous because it's something new. I haven't tried it. I didn't know how it's going to go. I didn't know like how to, now I've recorded 8 episodes. So I'm like, I've got a flow going, but in the beginning it wasn't. And so having people like that you really know, they're your friends, they know each other. So it's like the vibe is good. That's really important. I think if you are going to be like interviewing guests on a podcast or on a show or whatever. And then once I started kind of exhausting my personal, like people who I thought were close friends, I started asking favors, right? So now it became kind of friends of friends, right? And so I was able to get some intros into some other really, large people that I didn't know personally, but, they vouched for me, basically said, hey, I went on this show. It was great. You should go on it. Here's my episode, right? So I called in favors. And then now I have started getting to the point where I do have a lot of like, episodes planned and everything, like people slotted in, but like I'm now starting to think a little bit more creatively about like maybe reaching a little higher to people who I don't know anyone who knows them. And so like, how am I going to pitch them? Right. And so I'm getting into that phase now. And that's really exciting, kind of figuring out that challenge. Let's talk about logistics. It's logistically more difficult to coordinate, to find a day and a time that works for multiple guests. So what we had to do was we did research and found out that Calendly, if you've ever heard of Calendly, that tool that helps you kind of like schedule stuff, has a feature where you can vote on different times. Like it's a poll, it's like a meeting poll. And so we developed this workflow where we can create these customized podcasts. So like if I find 2 guests, we pick a topic and we find 2 guests to debate each side, then we customize a Calendly link just for that debate. It's never going to be used again. It's just for that debate. And we say, okay, here's like the 6 or 7 times and days that you can pick. And then I send it to both guests. And then they kind of say what their availabilities are. And then I cross my fingers and hope that there's overlap on at least one of the days. And that's it, honestly. And so it's only happened once where like someone said, oh, I can't make any of those days work. And so we had to kind of scramble. But again, it increases the operational complexity of trying to do a format like this. And then the other thing too, is that I have had situations where people are debating each other and they've never met. right? So the dynamics there, making, as moderator, making them feel comfortable. And so it's like, it's not something that you can overlook, right? Because if you want to get good content, you have to, your job is to kind of make people feel more comfortable and kind of, at the beginning before you hit record, kind of get, loosen everyone up and all that stuff too. And so I use my stupid sound effects and I used to tell them about the buzzer and, it's like, you just kind of get that going, right? So that's about like kind of the dynamics of recruitment. The next thing I wanted to talk about is how did I market my podcast like prior to the launch? So the first thing is that I pre-hyped it in my newsletter and I talked about the behind the scenes. You probably, if you're on my newsletter, you may have seen this video that I did where I kind of showed the behind the scenes of like, what I'm thinking about. I showed you kind of the early, phases of the logo and like, what it might look like. And like, it's a video podcast and like all sorts of stuff. I kind of was giving you a peek behind the curtains. And I think that is a really important, like, aspect of getting people excited about a project, right? Because so much content is released on a daily and weekly basis in general on the internet, right? And so it's like, how are you going to cut through the noise? And so part of it is like building up interest and building up intention. I picked a launch date. I was like, okay, January 30th, that's going to be my launch date. I'm going to tell that to everyone on social media. I'm going to, put in the bio of the Creator Debates handle, okay, podcast launching on, January 30th, right? So it's like, you start to get that momentum. On Twitter, I started, another thing that I did is after every episode, I would take a screenshot of like all three of us, like me and the two guests going like, like this or like this, like a debate or whatever. And then I would post that on Twitter and I would tag the Creator Debates handle. I would say, Twitter versus Instagram. And I would like tag the two people who were in it, like this person versus this person. And then I'd be like coming soon on Creator Debates, and I would tag Creator Debates. And so started getting people following that. And so like that, I think also was like and I edited my own bio saying that I'm now the host of Creator Debates. And so I was like trying to be very strategic about how I started to keep plugging it and all that stuff too. I pitched press. I pitched the Published Press. Those of you who are on Colin and Samir's newsletter, they have a newsletter called the Published Press, which is great. And I pitched Hannah, who's one of their writers, and she included it. I shot my shot, and I was like, "Hey, Hannah, I think your audience might enjoy this. I've got a new podcast where creators are debating each other." And she's like, "This is amazing. Yes, of course, I'm going to include this." Right? And I didn't know her. I'd never interacted with her before. I think maybe we had followed each other on social media, but I just basically made a pitch. So I did that. And then, another thing that I think is like kind of highly underrated when you're launching a new project or like trying to get something off the ground is you literally just ask people. I posted a tweet and I also did this in my newsletter and I basically said, I don't really ask for much on here. I post a lot of content. I try to be helpful. But I was wondering if you would share my podcast with a friend or would you share it with your audience? I basically said, I'm so excited about this project and I want as many creators as possible to discover it. And it would mean so much to me. I just was very heartfelt about it. And I can't tell you how, man, it really touched me. Like people just kind of came out of the woodwork. They're like, I'm going to put it in my newsletter this week and I'm going to share it on my YouTube community tab and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to share it here and all this stuff. And it's like, man, it just really touched me. Honestly, it was so beautiful. And it was like, it felt, I'm like a big believer in just kind of like karma. And I feel as though I put a lot of good energy out there into the universe. Anytime anyone is like launching something or trying to get the word out about something, I'll just like respond on social and be like, hey, you want me to include this in the newsletter? You probably see on the newsletter, I do these like shout outs, right? And literally the vast majority of the time, these are not paid. Like I'm just doing it because either it's a friend or sometimes it's someone I like. The last couple I've done, I didn't really even know the people very much, but I thought it was cool. And so I gave them a shout out. And so like, I do feel like that karma stuff kind of comes around, it comes around. And so, just literally asking sometimes like, hey, will you share this like to your audience or something, or tell a friend about it? Like people will do it. Like it was actually really, really heartwarming. Lakista Arena. Did I say your name correctly? I hope I did. I appreciate you, your content, and your newsletters. That really means so much to me. Thank you. Really, really, really does. Did I say your name? I hope I said your name correctly. Correct me if I didn't. We've got Blood Raven YouTube tuning in. We've got Dad Vlog. What's going on, Dad Vlog? Tyler for the record. Hannah Begum tuning in on Instagram. Good to see you. And you said no, that's not how you pronounce your name. Can you tell me how it is? I apologize. That's okay though. If you could let me know how to pronounce it, I would appreciate it because I really do want to know. Okay. I want to talk about, before we dive into Q&A, I wanted to talk about my ongoing plan, right? So it's like, okay, I've launched the project, got some great, fanfare initially, but then once the grand opening is over, right? And once that kind of allure has faded, the novelty of something new, what's the ongoing plan? Because you have to have an ongoing plan. You can't just be like, oh, I launched this thing and, well, no one's talking about it. I guess I suck, right? You have to evolve. You have to be willing to understand that, like, you're going to have this bump at the beginning. You're going to have lots of people sharing it, talking about it, all that stuff too. But like, what is the plan after that? LaQuista, awesome. Thank you so much, LaQuista. I appreciate that. All right. So, in terms of like the ongoing strategy, right, is you have to play with the format, right? So, one of the things that I think is, I feel as though the format's pretty good in terms of like, the time, the rounds and like 2-minute time, timer and the buzzer and all this stuff, right? But there are situations where, like, I was like looking at these topics and I'm like, I want to debate some of these. These are fun. Like, I want to be involved in these, right? And so I felt like it was not fair for me to be both the moderator and a guest. And so I was like, how can I do this? And so I asked Dee, a lot of you know Dee, who is my community manager and also a sponsorship coach on my team. And I was like, hey, Dee, will you moderate this one for me? Because I want to be a guest on it. So I literally just recorded an episode with my friend Kevin, who is a manager. And we recorded an episode about, having a manager versus not having a manager as a creator. And so demoderated it. I basically went head to head with Kevin. Obviously my argument was to not have a manager. And it was super fun. Like, and again, like, I'm playing with the format and I just didn't really know how it was going to go. And it was super fun. And so, that's one thing. I'm playing with the format. Also too, like, going back to that whole initial idea, that's also another way of like tying this new project back to my original business, right? Of like sponsorship coaching, right? So people who may be watching the podcast, listening or watching the podcast, who didn't know, I that's my expertise and I do coaching around that stuff. They'll hear me on an episode like that where I'm actually a guest. And so it's like, again, there's kind of these ways to kind of tie it back to your other business, basically, right? And then, the next thing is, at the end of every episode, when I am done interviewing the guests, is I ask them, how could I improve? Because I'm interviewing creators. I'm interviewing creative people. And so sometimes they may have, ideas that I just literally have never thought of, right? And great example is, yesterday I interviewed Nathan Barry, who is the CEO of ConvertKit, and I interviewed Dan Schipper, who is the CEO of Every. These are both 2 newsletter companies, and they went head to head on free newsletters versus paid newsletters. And it was awesome. It was a great debate. And they're both creators themselves, obviously. But I asked this question at the end, and Nathan in particular had an amazing idea. He was like, you know what? You're getting these like amazing high profile guests on the podcast, and you're booking an hour, but you're basically only using up 30 minutes. And so you're like giving back people 30 minutes, which is great. But at the same time, is there something that you can do at the end where maybe you're like, you record an extra 10 or 15 minutes of content that becomes exclusive content somewhere, or bonus content, right? Like, hey, if you want to hear Nathan and Dan debate about some other aspect that's like a really juicy subject about newsletters or whatever, then join my newsletter, or maybe pay to be a patron, or like this type of idea, right? So it's like you create some bonus content that you can use somehow exclusively, like elsewhere, right? Maybe it's like a paid version of the newsletter, or it's maybe, I don't know, but I thought that was like a brilliant idea, because it's right. It's like a lot of work to, like, the way he said it is like, you've done 95% of the work to get people here, to have them show up. And then you basically say at the end, like, hey, we're going to like 10, 15 minutes. Let's do like a rapid fire round of something that's kind of juicy, right? You get a bunch of kind of hot takes or something. And that's fun. That's super fun. And you can use that in kind of a different way. And so that was really cool. The other thing that Nathan suggested, which I thought was brilliant, is he said, hey, you should figure out a way to make the guests argue each other's positions. And the way in my mind, I was like, this feels like an Uno reverse, right? It's like you throw down the Uno reverse. All right, we've gotten to the end of the debate. Now you have to argue each other's positions, right? Which I thought was super fun and novel. And like, maybe that I thought to myself, I said, Nathan, that's a great idea. Maybe this kind of reverse argument is the exclusive content. I don't really know. But again, like, those are 2 brilliant ideas that I never would have thought of, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I would have eventually, but like, I don't know, just like really creative, super smart. And so I'm going to like think about how to integrate that into the workflow, right? The other thing that I'm doing is that I am playing with, this was another guest suggestion early on, was I'm playing with having a voting mechanism. So my call to action in the first couple episodes was like, subscribe to my newsletter, or like, subscribe on YouTube, follow the podcast, review it, all this stuff too. But now my main call to action is click the link in the episode description and vote on who won this creator debate. So how fun is that now? So if people are sharing this on social media, there's like a link, some sort of landing page where you can see the real time like voting, right? Because these episodes are going to live on forever. You can see the real time voting of like who won the episode, right? Which I just think is super fun. And just from a behind the scenes business building perspective, I'm going to have an option where after you vote, it's optional, but after you vote, hey, you want to join my newsletter? Right? So lead gen, right? You got to start thinking strategically about this stuff, right? And so I haven't quite figured out the logistics of how I'm going to do the voting and all that stuff too, because ConvertKit natively doesn't have like a way for me to do kind of like a landing page where there's like a poll initially, and then you vote, and then it displays the results, and then there's like, you can opt into the newsletter. Right? So I'm going to figure it out, but like, smart idea, right? So another way to kind of funnel people who like listeners onto my newsletter, right? So I have a more of a direct connection with them. So love that idea, and going to be implementing that in future episodes. Another thing about kind of the ongoing plan is just like getting smarter about promoting my own stuff in the newsletter. Right now, the main thing that I'm promoting is ConvertKit, who's the sponsor, obviously, but then I do kind of a call to action to the newsletter at the end. But like my friend Jay, who also has a video podcast, he has been using all of that kind of like ad space to promote his own stuff, right? So promote his own newsletter, promote like his workshops or courses, his membership, he promotes a lot. Or another thing he does is he had 100+ audio only episodes of his podcast before he started doing a video podcast. So he has been promoting the back catalog. He's like, hey, did you know that, there's 100+ audio only episodes that you can check out? If you enjoy this video podcast, you should go back and look at those. So, just being smarter about kind of like, you're your own sponsor, basically, you do your own ad read for yourself, essentially. So I thought that was really smart. So I just need to get smarter about that. And then as of now, I only have one ad read, which is ConvertKit. They're the only sponsor. And so I have I have it like integrated into the show that there's like this very specific place where I say, I want to hear your opinion on that. Guest one. But first, a word from our sponsor, this kind of idea. And then I roll the sponsor thing. And then I said, okay, now back into the conversation, this type of thing. So I have it like built into the outline of the script or the episode. But, easily, like, again, as we talked about at the top around strategy, like I'm definitely going to be integrating multiple sponsors at some point. Once I the dust settles with the launch a little bit and I start pitching additional brands. And so I'm going to have to, change the structure of the show a little bit to ensure that there's like multiple sponsor slots and like maybe a pre-roll, post-roll, whatever. Right. And so like, that's definitely a part of the plan of like moving forward. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of it. That's a lot. I mean, I know we spent kind of the bulk of the live stream talking about this, but it seems like I see some of your comments in here that it was helpful. Parker's on the go says, so happy to catch this. We always wonder how to handle new projects in a smart way. 100%. So glad to hear that's helpful. Leona Rodriguez said, do you get lost creatively when you're making decisions about things, whether it's your podcast or topics, being a sole creative? I know you have a team, but to trust other people's feedback. It's a really, really great question, Leona. And I'd love to talk about it because I heard this saying one time, and I don't remember exactly where it was from. So I'm gonna butcher it, I'm sure. But it's like the saying is like, once you master something, or once you get so good at something that you can do it in your sleep, you have to hire someone to do it for you, because there's always another plane. There's always not a plane of existence, but there's another plane of creativity that you have yet to unlock that you need to then start chasing. Because if you've mastered this task, or you mastered this one thing, then you need to delegate that to someone else. That's no longer a good utilization of your zone of genius, basically. And so I feel as though, Leona, that I am quite good at this particular skill of delegation, because like I am not. There is, the way I look at it is, there are so many people in this world. There's so many people on this earth that are probably like 99.9% of people are going to be better than you at like this one thing, right? And so whether it comes to video editors or people who can help you write scripts or people who can help you, with your graphic design or people who can help, write, blog posts or whatever it is, there exists a human on this earth that is better than you at that. And your job should be to find that person within budget and within reason and all this stuff too. Caveat. But like, I don't really get lost creatively with that kind of stuff because I feel, I will say it did take me a while to find certain folks. So like I went through 4 or 5 different script writers before I met George. And that was like a very serendipitous way in which I met my writer, George. He used to work for Ali Abdaal. He was on Ali Abdaal's team. And it just so happened we kind of, crossed paths, and I made a pitch to him like, hey, would you be interested in helping me write scripts on kind of a freelance basis? And I just started giving him more and more and more work to the point where he's like managing a whole heck of a lot in my business. Like, recently he's kind of taken over the role of like managing everything that is being published by my brand, by me, by the Creator Wizard, personal brand on a daily and weekly and monthly basis. And so this is not just content. This is also my newsletter. I have a 3 times a week newsletter. So I have a Monday newsletter that I post, which is a unique piece of content every week. I have my Thursday newsletter, which is a curation of sponsorship opportunities, which is unique as well. And then I have an evergreen nurture sequence for my Saturday emails, which is basically kind of recycling the back catalog of content, videos, articles that we've written over the last 2 years. And so that takes a lot to coordinate all that, and in the actual content within that, we're oftentimes shouting out or we're promoting different things. We're shouting out someone here. We're promoting a course or something. We're an affiliate for, a launch of something, we have sponsors, right? So it's like a lot. And you have to, also the other like really interesting thing is like, we are in negotiations with like probably right now like 4 or 5 different companies about sponsoring us, right? And so logistically, we don't have an infinite supply of slots for that someone can sponsor. And so we have to like manage those conversations to make sure we're not promising the same thing to multiple entities, right? So if you're saying, hey, you can sponsor this newsletter for the month of March or whatever, because we have like one main title sponsor, then like we can't pitch that to someone else, right? So it's like there's all these moving pieces, right? And so I previously had my little chunk of brain right here allocated, or large chunk of brain allocated to keeping track of all that stuff. And now I basically kind of offloaded that to George and be like, hey, I need you to like keep track of this stuff because it's preventing me from filming more content, doing videos, which is really, I believe, my teaching, making the courses better, the coaching mechanism, that workflow, all that stuff too. So I've got a lot of things going on in my business. So, it allows me to be more creative if I'm able to offload the things that, other people are better suited to do. Right. And I think like having the foresight and the humility to realize that they're like, a lot of creators, I absolutely have found this to be true, that a lot of creators be like, there's no way I can teach an editor or no way I can teach someone to like do this the way that I do it. And I challenge that every time because it's like, yes, it takes more time to potentially, instruct someone and teach someone like, hey, this is the way in which I do it. And it's going to take some time. Even for the podcast launch, y'all, when I, kind of handed off the editing responsibilities to Divya and his team, there was a lot of back and forth until we kind of nailed the format, because this is something that's never existed before, a format that's never existed. I wanted it to be awesome. I wanted it to look great. I wanted it to be super polished, and I wasn't going to accept just like anything, right? And so bless his heart, bless his team's heart. Like they were so amazing, like with being, open to the feedback that I was providing. They never got annoyed with me, even though I'm sure I was super annoying about it. But I was like, oh, this like pixel, we need to move this like box, like, 5 pixel to the left. So it's like balanced, and like all the, it just took so much work back and forth to get it to a place where I felt like this looks awesome. Like, I'm super proud to put my name on this. Right. And so you have to, it takes work to find people who are willing to like, do that with you. But that person exists out there. And imagine if you were able to delegate, all of the editing or whatever it is, whatever's like taking up a lot of time in your business. Imagine if you were able to delegate that to someone else, and then you can focus on making more compelling content, making more strategic business decisions, like whatever it is, right? So I really do believe, and again, like this is something that I've developed over 14 years being a creator. And so it's not something that happened overnight. I very much was kind of obsessed with the control and all that stuff early on. And so if you're still in that phase, kind of struggling with that, like, don't be too hard on yourself, but know that like it is a skill that you have to learn. Like a perfect example is like in our like kind of Notion, what's it called? Control room. Notion is like a tool to organize stuff, our home base or whatever. We have a whole huge section on SOPs, which is like standard operating procedures, which is basically how to do anything in my business. So if you want to like respond to, students of the course who are asking about XYZ, here's how you do it, right? And oftentimes there will be both a Loom video, like a video explaining the step-by-step, like a screen share. Here's how you do it. Here's the buttons you click. Here's what you say. Here's templates, blah, 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 blah. And then there's also like, step-by-step, like screenshots of like all the things. Here's you do this first, you do this first, you do this first. Because you need to have redundancy in your business, because if people go on vacation, if people quit, if people, just if there's any questions, you don't want to like spend time explaining things over and over and over, right? And so if you are serious about growing your business, one of the primary things that you need to do is start documenting everything. And you shouldn't be concerned if you ask. Like some people, I don't want to do SOPs because then my editor or like the people who work with me are going to feel like I'm going to replace them, or I'm going to like fire them and hire someone else or whatever. That's not the point. You need to foster a culture of documentation in your organization. That this is just something we do here. We document everything we do. If we ever do something if this is going to be something that we do more than once, we document it. That is the culture of my creator business. Right. And so like that is a expectation. That is something you talk about when you initially hire someone. And even if you want to do this, like after the fact, you lay it out, you help them understand this is why we're doing it, is because we need to systematize stuff. We need to make like, here's how I get very passionate about this particular topic, because I put myself in the shoes of my audience, of my potential customers, right? Because I have coaching, I have courses, all this stuff too. And I think about, okay, I want to know, what is it like when I interact with Creator Wizard? What does it feel like if I submit a form on the contact us page, or if I reply to an email newsletter, or if I submit an inquiry asking about the course or about doing a one-on-one or whatever? Does it take Justin and his team 3 months to get back to me, or does it take them 6 hours? Right? That's the extreme. Like, I'm not saying that we're there yet, like we're not quite there yet, but like there's the idea of developing what's called a SLA, or a service level agreement, right? So you say, hey, we are going to get back to anyone who responds to us inquiring about coaching or courses or whatever within 6 hours. That's the goal, right? And you have to get there, but like, or we're going to, even people who respond to the newsletters with an innocuous question about, needing help with like, struggling with certain negotiation principles or whatever, we're still replying with links to YouTube videos or links to blog posts or whatever, this type of idea, right? So it's like, because again, you think of yourself as a business owner, that is a touch point. That person could potentially become a customer down the line, could become someone that I coach or a course student or whatever, right? And so it's like, you have to treat everyone with equal respect and equal, empathy. Even if they never become customers, like I've been very vocal about this. Like I do not, the majority of y'all are never going to become a customer. And I'm cool with that, right? I just know that there is a small subset who will, and it's my mission that I want to, let me know in the chat. If you are on my newsletter, or you have left a comment or something on my social media, let me know, have I ever responded to you? Have I responded to your email? Have I responded to your comment? Because this is something I take really seriously and it means a lot to me, is like trying to get back to like almost everyone that reaches out to me or responds to me, because I think it's a level of respect. Obviously, like as the business grows, I have 13,000 creators on my newsletter now. And so every single day, I'm probably getting 50 to 100 replies on these emails, because again, it's not just the broadcast emails on Mondays and Thursdays, it's on Saturdays. People like read emails on different days, right? And so like this is it's a huge volume, right? And this is only going to increase, right? And so I recently brought on another person onto my team who's like basically dedicated to like replying to, like helping me draft emails. I go in there, we've got templates, we've got if they ask this is the video you do, and then I go in and I look and I say, yep, that's right, and I press send, right? And so it's like, growing the team is as much about helping you grow your business in a way that people feel heard and valued and want to do business with you. All this stuff is like super important. And so there's no way that you're ever going to do that if you do not systematize it, if you do not write all these procedures and processes down so that you can help, train other people, right? How did this happen, y'all? We got to the top of the hour, and it's been like such a blast. Did you enjoy this? Did you enjoy talking about this? I know it's not kind of the normal thing that I talk about on these lives, but I get asked a lot about like launching things and like, oh, how would you do it if I was launching a new Instagram or a new TikTok or like a new newsletter or whatever, this type of thing. And I wanted to talk about it because I think it's like it's a fun topic and not something that I see a lot talked about, right? So yeah, really, Miss Juno says top-notch service and response every time. You've always been extremely responsive anytime I've reached out on Twitter or email. Top-notch. That's huge. That really means a lot to me, honestly. Like you're hitting me right in the feels right here, Mrs. Juno. Mrs. Juno, what's your first name? I don't know if I've ever known your first name, so I appreciate that. That really, really means a lot to me. Y'all, I can't believe it. We're already at the hour. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful weekend. I will not be doing a live stream next week because I have some obligations. So I hope you have a wonderful like week ahead, and then hopefully I'll hit you back on the following week. And again, those of you who are kind of in my world, in my universe, know that the next cohort of Brand Deal Wizard, my cohort-based course, is launching on February 23rd. So if you're interested in that, if you've been waiting anxiously since October or November when I had the last cohort, definitely keep an eye on your email for that because it's going to be a great one. Yeah, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you on the flip side. Peace.